Hello everybody, this is the 8th Books and Balance program pre-recorded video. This is the part 2 content for the 7th week of the Books and Balance program. And this week's topic today is going to be rewiring your thoughts and stopping the rumination cycle with cognitive restructuring and mindfulness strategies. Today we're going to be going through what ruminating thoughts are, evidence on cognitive restructuring and mindfulness for reducing those ruminating thoughts. We're going to go through a brief review of mindfulness techniques and then go through an example of how to practice cognitive restructuring and how to kind of reframe your thoughts to be more positive. So first we need to answer the question of what are ruminating thoughts? Ruminating thoughts really involve that repetitive thinking or dwelling on very negative feelings and distress and their causes and consequences. So the repetitive negative thinking kind of leads to the development of anxiety and depression. And so basically it involves kind of repeatedly dwelling on negative thoughts, feelings, and experiences. And the person will often have repetitive thinking and focus on those same thoughts over and over and over again and dwell on the negative aspects of a situation after it occurred. They're going to have feelings of anxiety and sadness and dwell on those feelings and get very stuck in these negative thoughts without sort of actively seeking solutions. You're on this cycle and this path of negativity. So some steps that you can take to kind of break that cycle of rumination involve distracting yourself with activities to help you kind of interrupt that negative thinking. You can try to deliberately recall times when things worked out, even though you maybe did have a challenge, a significant challenge. And then you can engage in physical activity, or you can take a moment to move to another environment, change the environment where you're at to kind of distract yourself, get out of the situation. And then also trying to kind of separate out different problems or break down larger problems into smaller parts as well to help you problem solve through some of those situations. Some other specific examples on how to get out of that rumination cycle involve cognitive restructuring and engaging in mindfulness practices. So now we're going to talk about that cognitive restructuring that we just mentioned. This is a form of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, and it involves kind of this process of identifying very unhelpful thoughts and replacing those negative, unhelpful thoughts with more positive, reality-based thoughts. So it involves identifying, hey, I'm having a very negative and irrational thought. I need to think more rationally and more positively, and I'm going to reshape my thought. Maybe I'm changing my words, maybe I'm changing the complete sentence that I'm saying out loud, but it really helps you get out of that negative thought cycle. So cognitive restructuring involves identifying and intentionally changing those negative thought patterns and those negative ruminating thoughts by replacing them with those more rational and evidence-based thoughts, things that just make more sense. Researchers conducted a study in 2023 to examine the impact of cognitive restructuring on post-event rumination in socially anxious adolescents. So after an event took place, these adolescents were thinking on it, they weren't letting it go, and they were seeing what cognitive restructuring did. They completed some statistical analysis, and at the conclusion of the study, it showed that the participants' post-event rumination and their social anxiety symptoms were significantly improved after they partook in a cognitive restructuring intervention. And it had moderate to high effect size as well. So for those that know anything about some of those statistical studies and research studies, that just shows you that truly cognitive restructuring can help kind of break that negative cycle. So there's also quite a bit of evidence showing that mindfulness and various distraction techniques can be really useful for helping break that negative rumination cycle. So we've discussed mindfulness in depth during previous weeks of the Books and Balance program, but these strategies can really help you face your feelings in a very non-judgmental way, and they can also act as a form of distraction to kind of get you out of your mind and help relax those thoughts. So I did want to touch on a mindfulness video that is on YouTube, and it depicts these leaves flowing down a stream. And in this thing, you are asked to visualize placing negative thoughts, these negative life situations on the leaves, and letting them flow down the stream in the river to let them go. Once they flow away, they let you go, and to help you calm your mind. So techniques like those videos of mindfulness looking at the mindfulness techniques that we've talked about before, which we'll talk about in a second again briefly, using those methods can really help you decrease those ruminating thoughts. So I did place that video on that mindfulness playlist that I created on YouTube just for you guys to review in case you do maybe struggle with ruminating thoughts. Some researchers in 2012 actually explored the effects that distraction techniques, problem solving, and mindfulness techniques had on reducing ruminating thoughts in youth. And they found that both distraction and mindfulness techniques can help reduce those ruminating thoughts and, quote, get youth out of a ruminative state. So although those studies and the study mentioned on the previous slide were studies that were done on youth, they do highlight the effectiveness that cognitive restructuring has, those distraction methods, and those mindfulness strategies can have on decreasing ruminating thoughts. And they could be a helpful strategy for teachers to improve your guys' mental health if you do kind of struggle getting yourself in some of those patterns of negativity. I know we only talked very briefly on the previous slide about those mindfulness techniques, but I did put them on this slide for your review. They involve things like body scan, progressive muscle relaxation, guided imagery, diaphragmatic breathing, mindful breathing, that 5 senses mindfulness, mountain meditation, box breathing, and different visualization exercises as well. There's a multitude of resources for you guys on mindfulness techniques, and so I did create that playlist. Please refer back to that too, and just make sure that you're integrating those into your daily lives, and we know that it can help you with these ruminating thoughts. I wanted just to give a quick example of cognitive restructuring and how that would kind of look with maybe an example. And so the first thing is focusing on the event. What was the event? The event was that the principal maybe seems angry. I saw him in the hallway. He seemed kind of angry. He seemed kind of off. The initial thought that you might jump to is, I must have made a mistake. Now I've done it. He's mad at me. Ugh, they're going to fire me for sure. The consequence in the behavior of having that negative thought is that I feel sad. I'm very anxious. I've spent lots of time obsessing over my mistakes, thinking about what did I do? What could I have done to make him mad? What did I do? But then it involves taking that statement and kind of rationally thinking through it and replacing it with a rational counter statement. And that could be, okay, the principal could have been angry about anything. He might be angry. We're all people. We get angry. They're usually happy with my work, so even if I did make a mistake once, it's not a big deal. They haven't fired people over this kind of thing in the past. It's going to be okay. It's not a big deal. I'm working hard. He could have been angry about something else. It's probably nothing to do with me. So coming up with that initial, I must have made a mistake, he's mad at me, that irrational thinking, and taking a moment back and thinking, okay, what was the event? What was the thought that I had? How am I feeling because I have that thought? And can I rationally think about that situation and change that thought to become a little bit more rational, a little bit more positive? And so this is just an example of how you can kind of do that cognitive restructuring. If you do struggle with ruminating thoughts, I do realize that some of you may not, but if you do, I recommend that this week you go through the PDF of that cognitive restructuring prompts when you have maybe a ruminating thought or a situation or a negative thing that you can't get out of your mind. And so you can go through the steps on that document when you have that irrational negative thought and kind of practice changing those thoughts into more rational and positive ones. And I did put a picture of that little diagram on this page. I also recommend that you consider keeping a thought journal or a thought record if you're struggling with ruminating thoughts. And so I created one that's just blank that you guys can use to help kind of write down if this is something that you struggle with, or you can simply just make a journal, a blank sheet of paper, and write down some of those thoughts as well. And sometimes when they're written down, you can kind of rationally look at them and you can see the falsities within those statements and you can kind of better change those thoughts. So when you write down, principal's mad at me, I did something bad, he looked at me funny, or a coworker's mad at me, I must have done something. Then you can kind of look at that on paper and you can go through those steps in making it more rational, and it can kind of help you better change those thoughts into more positive, optimistic thinking. These are the references that I use for the content relating to the ruminating thoughts, cognitive restructuring, and mindfulness in the context of decreasing those ruminating thoughts. And I just want to thank you guys so much for listening to this week's voiceover. If you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, please contact me using my contact information on this slide. And I just want to take a moment to thank you all for your participation in this entire Books and Balance program. As a reminder, I will be creating a website with all of the resources, the videos throughout this program, handouts, worksheets, links, resources. All of that will be on the website, and I'll be sending that out to all staff for reference in the future. It's been such a pleasure working with all of you guys, and I appreciate you taking me into your school this semester and working with me, and I hope that you were able to benefit from some aspect of the Books and Balance program. Thank you.